Welcome, welcome, welcome to Christian Women Business Builders Podcast. We have a special episode today in that we have a guest with us, and not just any guest, but a really wonderful guest who I've had the privilege of knowing for probably 2 or 3 years now.
Yeah.
I'm so bad with time, but we
Yeah.
have Allison Peterson with us today. And Allison is going to be sharing her story with us on how her business has evolved into a community model. Maybe that wasn't the original intention, but it's where she is now. And I love, love, love her heart for not only what she's built, but also what the Lord is doing in that space. So, Allison, say hello. Tell us a little bit, just kind of give us the brief bio of yourself before we get to dig into more.
Yeah. Well, Cassie, I'm so glad to be a part of the podcast. I've been following along with Christian women business builders for a long time and just have felt really inspired by the work that we get to do to talk about connecting our business to our faith. Like that's something I was looking for, and I found it in what you've offered. So I'm so grateful to be a part of this community, actually. To make a long story short, because it's kind of a long journey that I've been on. This is actually my 18th year in education. So I was a teacher and I came out of the classroom and stepped into a position called instructional coaching. And that is a position that is supports teachers in the classroom and does like job embedded professional development. So
You're a
if they
teacher for teachers, right?
I'm a teacher for teachers. That's what I do. And I'm actually starting my 11th year in that role. And so what I found on my own journey is that I looked for and did find an amazing community of other teachers when I was a teacher who wanted to talk and connect and collaborate and do all these things together. And so when I transitioned from one school to another, we were moving out of state and I was feeling a little bit disconnected. So I started a community online, knowing in my mind that I wanted to step out maybe into consulting in the future, doing some things in schools and really like maybe turn this thing into a business. So I kind of knew that, and I'd heard that Facebook groups are like the way to go. I was kind of functioning on Twitter at the time, Twitter and Instagram a little bit, but I wasn't really loving those platforms and ways to connect people. So I started a Facebook group I called it #new2coaching. So I was 5 years into the work of instructional coaching, and there were all of these women online who were also starting coaching, but they were starting back from the beginning. And so I had a little bit of experience. I'd done a deep dive. I knew some things. I had some things to share. And of course, I wanted to connect with other instructional coaches. So I started #new2coaching as a Facebook group in 2019. Yes, because my baby is about to be 5 this week, and it all goes in alignment with her being born.
I love it.
So it's the actual community is like just turned 5 this past summer. And out of that, I've also built a paid community that is kind of started out as a cohort model, moved to a mastermind model. So I'll talk a little bit more about that, but really have built my whole business on the backbone of this community that I started 5 years ago.
I love this. Now, tell us kind of your heart behind that original community. Had you decided to do a business at that point? Or at that point, were you still like, let's just get people together, let's create that space for them to connect? What was your thoughts when you were first creating that initial Facebook community?
Yeah, no, I thought back on it. Originally, it was intended to be a community a business, because I had done a lot of research and found these, marketing gurus online who said to build a course. And then if you have a course, you need to be able to sell it. And I thought that in my mind that I was building a course and that maybe I could sell it. So like, that's where I was starting with this whole thing. And I also I had connected with another lady who was doing like online summits for instructional coaches. And so I got an opportunity to speak at her. That was a big turning point for me when I got an opportunity to speak at her summit. That brought more people into my community as well. So I knew that I wanted to do speaking, and I knew that I wanted to do consulting. I knew I was going that direction, but I didn't know that building a community would be how I would do it. I just knew naturally I did love to connect with people. I had built my like Twitter connection with all of these other educators. There's a very big world of educators out there online. And so I just knew leaning into connecting with people would be the starting point, and that would also give me a space to sell.
That's beautiful. So you built that community
Yeah.
space before you had a product to try to sell to them.
Yes, and my first product, just to go into the story, was again, watching the videos and learning from people, was to go live in the group and teach something. So I did, I think it was called the first 4 weeks of coaching then too. So I did like 4 live sessions and I packaged it as an online course. So I taught it live in the group. I watched some like, marketing videos about how to go live and how to keep people engaged when you're live. And I thrive on live, friend. Like other people like pre-recorded, just put me in front of. So like that worked for me. And I loved connecting with people because when you could start seeing comments and answering questions, it was just a place where I was
And
like,
because you had that community, you had the engagement. You had people
yes,
there ready to comment, ready to engage, ask
yes.
questions, and kind of create some of that backbone.
Well, and what I really had was an audience who was desperate to learn about this role, like
I love that.
desperate to learn about what they're supposed to do in this new job that they've gotten hired into. And so they wanted answers. And I didn't really have every answer in the book, but I had a few things I could tell them. And they were like, "Oh, someone's online talking about this." There are a lot of books out in this field, but there aren't a lot of online resources like, like live sessions and online courses. And some of those have recently been more like released. But when I started this 5 years ago, the summit that I was doing, that virtual summit, was kind of the closest thing to some online content. So the audience was really on my heart, though. Like my heart was for that new coach I was talking to who was like, "I'm so lost and confused," and I wanted to help her. And that became like, God had already kind of given me that audience, really, but like he really kindled it for me when he showed me their need, their deep-seated need. And also I've learned in the process of connecting with them that this is often a faith journey, even though they don't even know it, but they've stepped out in faith into this new job. And they have made a commitment of, "I'm going to do this." They've made a faithful step of changing their life, of changing schools, of moving their kids. Like often it's a very big life change for them. And they're often looking for like, did I make the right decision?
Well, and talk to me because I know
Yeah.
that for you particularly, your community, you use faith principles, but you do not serve a faith-based community. So share how that heart of community has allowed you to be able to be that influence without having to speak directly to Christians. Because I think there's a lot of confusion sometimes for people like, oh, do I only have to serve fellow believers? Talk to us about how the community has given you a place to show up but still serve, everyone.
Yes. Well, and I would say that the community is centered around the educator who is coming into this role. So that's our commonality that we're all joining in. And education has a lot of different perspectives and all these things. So sometimes you do have to be a little mindful about like spouting your faith everywhere because it's in public schools. You're not supposed to put faith in public schools. I work in independent Christian schools where I'm allowed to talk about that. So I brought a lot of what I was teaching was a lot of servant leadership minded type of content. And so I didn't have to stamp it as Christian to talk to them about how they need to be people minded and how they need to be building their work around the people that are in front of them. And then like the discipleship model where you grab a few who are going to be a really powerful starting place, and then that will grow. Those things I knew. I mean, I knew them as my own best practice, but I also knew them as biblical foundational thoughts about how do you lead. What does Jesus say about leading? Wash feet, right? Like so, I knew how to bring some of those principles in without necessarily being like, this is Jesus, but it was so attractive to them, friend. Like the thing that I would say that I got the most feedback on is like, wow, I just love the approach and I love the way you think about things. It's different than what everyone else was teaching. Everyone else, and I don't want to say everyone, but some others have talked about like standing like equality with a teacher so that you're really trying to value them as a person. So that's not been said, but a lot of emphasis on this role is on collecting student data and like really worrying about the students and are they growing and the data, which is so important in our jobs, but it loses sight sometimes of the teacher and the heart of the teacher that we're trying to support. And honestly, the work we're doing is teacher to teacher. It's not coach to student. I don't work directly with students. I work directly with teachers. So I started to kind of just bring those Bible-based principles into the conversation, and it was so attractive to them. And they ran off and tried it and came back and went, "That worked. What's next?" And I was like,
I
"Great, let's."
love that it's countercultural, even in something like this, where it's not, you're not leading with faith first. It's not something where you're going out there and saying, I only serve fellow Christian teachers. But
Yep.
yet these principles are so attractive that they're kind of shifting the way. I know you've said, even with your book coming out,
Yep.
that this is really a new way, and you see other teachers using some of your principles and sharing some of your language. So it's almost become a movement, if you will, that started from the heart of community and valuing the relationships.
Yes, it did. And another thing, just before you ask me another question, that happened is because I was sharing those principles, the ladies who were most attracted to me, they knew where I was coming from. I didn't have to, I do sometimes say, like, in my faith, or like, I'm not hiding it,
Mhm.
but they knew. And so they became attracted. They were the ones who wanted to come into my paid community where I was doing more one-on-one coaching and cohort coaching, because they were super attracted to it. And they would say, "Are you Christian?" And
Thank
I'd be
you,
like, "Hey,
Christian.
you might have caught on to something there." But it really, what it did is it gave me an inner circle of the ladies that were my biggest part of my heart, is the ones that had a faith component and a coaching component, that I could coach both sides of that for them. Because we do a lot of deep personal work, and it's really spiritual work. You just, as people say, spiritual work, but it's
It's
spiritual
all
work.
spiritual work, right?
Right. But the spiritual work helps open up them to be better at their work, at their everyday work. So,
Now let's talk about your journey, because you've had a unique opportunity to have built a big front end community that is free. You
mhm,
serve your people. So we kind of call that like that invite, delight, and then connect.
yeah.
We get a lot of questions on how do I take people from free into paid? And I know you just kind of hinted to that a little bit, but
Yes.
will you walk us through your experience and what you've learned on being able to take a big group of people, serve them at a high level, and then connect them into a paid level of community? What does that look like for you in your journey, and what have you kind of learned along the way?
Yeah, so I have done live sessions as live workshops as my draw in, and asking them to register for those live workshops inside of my free group. So even though the group is free, right now there's 12,000 members in the group. Um, I still need them to register so that they can get all the reminders about when the live workshops are happening. So, like, just bringing them into the next layer down of the funnel. I get their email addresses when they come into the Facebook group. So that's kind of the first place that we're connecting. They're getting my weekly newsletter. Then, if I'm going to have a live event, I will have them register for that, and then I'll go live. Now, some people go live like 3 days in a row. Some people go live like for 9 days in a row, all these different models. The model that worked for my clients and my environment was going once a week for 3 weeks. It worked for me, it worked for them. So I was doing that. So I'm now staying with them for like a matter of like almost a month. I'm connecting with them each week. And every time they come back and they come back, they're getting closer and closer to a sales pitch. Now I am kind of like seeding throughout,
Mhm.
but on that third session is when I'm usually going to actually say, so I have an inner circle community, and it's called the Breakthrough Circle, and here's what you get, and you can come into it. And then I really extend that offer and that invite for them to come into my paid community behind the scenes. They get one-on-one coaching with me. They get an online library of resources. I was doing some live teaching sessions that was just private to that group. And then they get online connection with this inner circle community, which is inside of Marco Polo. We also have like a separate Facebook group for them, but mainly they connect in Marco Polo, which is a virtual video chat app if you've never used it. And it's amazing because it's like having your best friends in your back pocket. If you have a question, you could be walking down the hall at school, pop it open and be like, "Girls, I just walked away from this meeting and it went terrible. What do I do?" And they would be there. So by the time they had come to a few sessions with me, they were probably an ideal client and pretty close to being the ones who are going to come into that. And so then I would have uh, 12 to 15 come in to the paid community after I did a live session. So I would try to cycle those every like 6 to 8 weeks, depending on how long we were doing. And our school season kind of goes like this. So you kind of have to plan it around that. But I've been doing that as a way to invite. And then I would connect with them. If they came live to the sessions, I always asked them to put something in the comments so that I knew who they were. I'm following up with all them. Everybody who put a comment gets a DM. Thanks so much for coming to the session, because I love connecting with them genuinely. So what did you learn, or what did you need help with, and hearing more of their stories. Hopefully they want to come into the paid community, but even if they don't, they're still in my main community and I want to be a part of what they have going on. I'll start a conversation, make sure that I'm connecting with them. Then I will eventually like send a link to say, hey, just want to make sure you saw that you could join the breakthrough circle. And then, hold on. Sorry.
Is she okay?
Yes, I think her brother upset her. But I would send them a DM and offer them for them to join the paid group. And then if they did or did not, sometimes they'll still get back with me months later and say, hey, you know what? I think it's the right time to join. So those DM conversations are also really valuable for future connections, if not immediately. So that's how I've brought them into the paid community from that
So
point.
kind of taking this from what I'm hearing, if I were going to put this into a terminology or into an application, I'm hearing layers of intentional connection. So it's
Definitely.
not just going live and teaching them what you've come to teach and being like, okay, now buy my program or join me in my inner circle, or, whatever the pitch is. You're creating that conversation all the way through. So I'm sure in the lives, you're saying, now, what are your questions? Go ahead and comment below. Let me know what your thoughts are. Have you had this problem? So you're kind of creating connection there. And then you said you're personally going back and going and sending DMs to every person who comments. And I'm sure as they have questions, you're kind of moving that
Yes.
relationship and conversation towards the mastermind. Now, do you do a final push? I have a feeling you probably do, but talk to us about, like, can they join all the time? Is there a door that closes? What does that look like to kind of bring people in more of that cohort model?
Yeah, no, I definitely tried to create a closed door situation, because if you leave it open, then there's no real reason to buy now. And so I do try to do that, and have a timeline about a week after the last live session. And I make sure I kind of think about, like, which day of the week is a good day for them to be. And then I will do an email push beyond that, plus continuing with DMs. I personally do the DMs. Now, I could get somebody else to do those for me, but I really enjoy connecting with them, so it doesn't feel like a burden to me, but to some people it might.
Well, you do
Um,
this, what you said, 3 or 4 times a year. So this is something you kind of
right.
able to gear up for, you're emotionally and time ready for when you're
Yes.
making that commitment.
Yeah, and when I'm going live, it's very much about the community. Like, even if they don't come into anything that's my paid program, it's like the community is going live, come connect. They talk to each other in the comments. It's very much about, we are welcome to the new to coaching community. If you're new here, like, it's very much oriented around building community and welcoming them in, being a part of it. And I answer their questions. That's why live works for me, because it feels so personal. Whenever I'm pre-recording something, I'm like, who am I even talking
Who
to?
am I talking to? The strangers out there on the internet. Now, tell me we kind of talked a little bit before, and I loved the kind of, I don't know if it's a surprise or just like an unexpected mastermind that formed from the ladies who have joined the cohort model. So, talk to me how that has kind of turned into this back end of your business that's now creating more consistency for you that you maybe you'd anticipated. I don't know. Just share that piece of.
No. And there's so much of this I never could have anticipated. And remind also, another piece of it we'll talk about too that I never anticipated is that what I taught in the live sessions is what turned into my book. So I didn't come up with a book idea. I came up with a workshop and taught it for 3
Oh,
years,
yeah,
and
we're talking about that. Oh, yeah.
right, we had enough content for that, but when it comes to the paid community, I just started by hoping that somebody would say yes, right? Like, it was so just like a wish and a prayer, and God, you said I should try this, so here we go. And it was amazing because the first like 10 women who came to join, paid hardly anything, like $25 a month, like nothing. But they were my cohort. They started as a cohort group. They were so excited to be a part of it with me. We figured out how to use Marco Polo. Like, everything was just them helping me figure it out. But now those ladies are the core of the group. And so they have now been with me, those ladies, and then the ones who've joined like kind of within that first year. The ones who really loved the community wanted to be a part of it no matter what we were doing. So even though I started teaching the content in a cycle, I even created like a little graphic about how we cycle content. They weren't going anywhere. They kept coming back. And so I kind of started to create this, it formed this group that really was more like a mastermind rather than a cohort. This cohort had gone through and now they were on the other side of it, and they were just staying for the community. The content, sure, check for them. They sometimes didn't even come to the live calls, right? It was more about connecting with the ladies. And I did start, because became such a strong cohort, I did start an in-person um, mastermind retreat that we did because they wanted to meet each other. So I never would have said I'm going to start doing retreats. Like, that is not what I set out to do. I wanted to do virtual from home. So anyway, the idea morphed because they became such a great cohort. And now they stay into the community to participate and offer advice because they're 3 years in. They've gone through this with me. They've adopted my philosophy, and now they share it with the new coaches who are just getting hired, who are coming into the group looking like deers in headlights, not knowing where to start. So it created something within the community that I didn't expect, which is that I'm not the only expert anymore. And I love
Okay.
that because you don't want to carry that all the time. And so they're the ones who are sharing, and they're the ones who are fostering these new coaches alongside of me.
And they have different personalities, different expertise, different backgrounds. They can speak into
Yes.
situations that you may or may not have experience with. I love that so much. And they
Yes.
probably have a sense of ownership. Like, they probably feel like this is their community too.
Yes, and they have come to the 3 live the in-person retreats that we've done, and so, like, and they're gonna keep coming just because they wanna be a part of the community.
I
So
love that.
there became this core group who is now the community. So when I bring people in, I introduce them to the community because these ladies are here and they're ready to answer your questions. So it is starting to level off where it may become 2 different things, but because of the power of this mastermind group, knowing enough to share with the new ones, that it's so great for the new ones to join and connect with them. So for right now, it's still all one community, but the cohort model is what I started with, and I have mastermind, and I'm still bringing in new cohorts,
I
basically.
love that. That is so beautiful. Now, talk to us because you did just launch your new book this year, and I know that has been a labor of love getting this into the world. Your community was right there to support your book launch. But not only were they there to support it, they actually are the reason the book was created. The content came from how you were already serving your community. You already
Yes.
knew what keywords to put it under. You knew what research that they needed. You knew the questions to answer because you've been serving them for a couple of years now.
Yes.
Talk to us about that process and just how your community has shown up to support the book because it's a resource that's really valuable to them.
Yeah, well, it genuinely all started for me putting a post in the Facebook group that said, "What do you want to learn about?" It was like a poll. And I put some things in there, and they picked coaching cycles. And I swear it was the last one on the list that I wanted to do. I would have done all the others. And I was like, coaching cycles? Okay. Like, I don't know why, but it was kind of felt cumbersome to me. And so, but I was like, okay, that's what they said they wanted to learn. And then I created a workshop around it because I was like, why do they think this is so hard? I'm just being honest. To me, it felt like I knew how to do this. What are they not seeing? And so I started to try and break it down to make it more about connecting with people. So those intentional interactions that I'm telling you about that I do with my business, that's what I do when I'm coaching my teachers. And so I go and I intentionally interact with each of them, and know what they need, and then offer more help. And then, do you want to have a meeting? And it's the same model. So anyway, I started putting that together in an online course, and then that was so helpful to so many coaches. It just like blew their minds about how to think about this totally differently. And then eventually realized that, yeah, okay, I could probably package this in a book, but that took way longer in my mind than it should have, but God's timing always. So it took me about 2 years, a little more than 2 years actually, to get it from the workshop, format into a book format and self-publish it. But now when I released it in June, to the community, I just did 99-cent ebook to launch it because the print book wasn't ready yet. And they were all over it because they had already learned, some of them had already learned it from the workshop. So they wanted the book to go with the
They
workshop,
wanted
right?
their notes printed for them, right? They're like, "Give it
Yes.
all to me."
Yes. And I honestly, to be honest with you, I had this moment where I was like, why would they buy this book? They've already done the workshop. I just didn't understand. But the thing that they told me when I asked them that question, my core group was like, no, I want the book. And she was like, I'm rereading it and I'm just remembering all those core things that you said. The truth is that they don't remember everything in the workshop, but it is like the notes from the workshop are in the book. And so they get to kind of like refer to it and reference it and remember. And that was the value for them. And they
And as
loved
a
it.
side note here, as someone who is not an instructional teacher, but who's someone who does coaching,
Mhm.
I mean, is valuable for anybody who does coaching. I mean, I know it is for instructional teachers and there's content there really related to
Yeah.
teachers, but the structure and the coaching cycles itself, I mean, it's crazy valuable for anybody who is doing coaching in any form. So just as a side note there, we're going to put the link in there, but if you are a coach in general,
Yeah.
understanding those cycles for me personally, I think it opens up a way of looking at how to deliver more connection in an intentional way through your coaching. So,
Yeah.
I mean, I know that it's just a little advertisement there because the way that you
Yes.
lay it out, again, from somebody who's not seen your workshops, because I'm not an instructional teacher, but learning from you and knowing you, the book is very helpful in just a how to be intentional about your connections.
Yeah. Well, two things about that I wanted to say. One is that it's actually based on um the coaching literature out there, not the educational coaching literature, but the coaching literature. So that model of coaching is different than what the educational coaching literature is. So
Perfect. So
I like
that's something that you're brought in that's
drawing
part of
from
your
that.
flavor. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Because I was like,
Right.
this would really be valuable for any coach.
Yes.
And that makes sense. Okay.
Yes, and one of those books is Quiet Leadership by David Rock, which his book is fabulous if you are a coach of any kind. It's really good. But the other thing that I was going to say is that the community, because I did the workshop and then they were a part of it, then they went and tried it. This book is full of their stories.
Oh,
I
I
can tell
love
you
it.
my story. I do tell you my story, but it's full of their stories and how they did it. And the members of the community love to hear, what did you do? What did you do? Share with me what you did. Show me that thing that you created. They love to share. We have in the teacher world, we have this thing called teachers pay teachers, where teachers create things and they post it online and then they steal it from each other, basically. I mean, not steal it, they buy it from each other.
Good
But
one.
the culture of sharing in teaching is very big. And so when it comes to like, you did that, I want to do that exact same thing. I can just totally duplicate it. That's really attractive to my clients. So
Well, I
our
think it's beautiful that
community.
you're allowing your clients to share their stories because I think it can be
Yes.
sometimes easy to be like, oh, well, Allison can do it because she's an expert and she's been doing this for 11, plus years.
Yes.
But when you hear other teachers that may be new to it or not as experienced and you can hear their stories, it's like, oh, now I could do that too. So I love the relatability that happens when you share other stories in there too.
And they loved seeing their names in the book. They were like, "Oh my God, I'm in here." I was like,
I'm a
"Yeah, because you did this."
pop star.
So it was such a way to lift them up to the ones who had been working with me for so long, who really are ready to share, but they don't always feel that way. So that's what the book has become. That's why it feels so much like for the community and created by the community. But I would not have written it if I didn't have this community and God
Incredible.
telling me that I had to keep writing for the community because I could not get my head around why I needed to do this for me because there was no reason.
This
So
was not a book. This was not one of those vanity press projects where Allison was like, man, I got to get this book. It was truly
yeah.
serving the people who you knew needed it. And now talk to us about how this book is actually becoming a lead magnet of sorts, if you will, for reaching the very people who now you're going to be able to serve in that community model.
Yeah, I really see it as the first thing I can hand them when they come into the community. It is the way it's written just for that exact moment where they get hired and they feel lost and confused. So as soon as they come into the community, now I have times of the year where they come in more naturally, but at any time if they join, they're probably looking for something because they've searched Facebook for instructional coaching to find us. So that means they're looking,
Mm.
and that means here's the answer. So I want to be able to say, here's the book, go grab it. And it's so readable in that they can read it very quickly. It's 200 pages and it's big font. So it's not like it's going to be a heavy read. Whereas just being honest,
It's more like an
book,
approachable guidebook than it is like a manual or a how-to. It's not heavy. And the way that you write it, it's conversational,
yes, conversational.
not dry. And I think that helps so much too when you're reading it, because it really does feel more like it's a story-based learning, not just this is what you have to go do it. So I
Yeah.
could see
And
how it'd be a quick read.
that voice is just really different from anything else they're going to
Mm.
find in this field. And so the other stuff may feel really educational and almost like they had to go to college and read some
It's like
stuff.
textbook, right? Like it feels
Textbook.
like they're reading a
Textbook. Yeah.
textbook.
So this feels like we went to coffee together and I told you
Mhm.
my story and how you can use some of the things that I've done. And don't you want to talk to her more because she seems really approachable? Like that's the idea.
Like I say, as not an instructional teacher, I was like, oh man, I want to learn more about this. I'm like, wait a minute, I don't even do this. But it was that a
Exactly.
thing where it definitely it gave a lot of value. And I know that your live trainings do that as well. But it also opened up the question of what more is there.
Yeah.
And I think that's that perfect blend of, again, connecting and serving, but letting people know that of course there's more to come because we have more questions, we need more help.
Yeah.
So I think it's a perfect tool for that. Allison, as we kind of wrap up here and as we're just sharing your heart for community, I know this is a big question and you may not know the answer to it, but I always like to kind of give a little bit of future pace. Where do you see the Lord calling you next?
It is a big question that I have been keeping my hands open
Mm.
for and praying and asking about. He keeps telling me we're just working on this right now. The book is the thing we're working on. That's kind of the last word I heard, and I'm not leaving the word that I heard. So, but I do believe that he's shown me that this book is going to be a foundation that the business will build up from.
Mm.
There's at least one more book that really is a complement to this one that says all the things that I left out of this one because I was trying to keep this one like really tight within the boundaries of that workshop that I did. But there's a lot more to share. So I do think I'm gonna work on one more book at least. And then those two things God has just said, like this will be where we will build up from. And that's about all I know at this point. I
I
just
love
know
it.
that the book is important and that it's a linchpin in a lot of things he's gonna turn and do.
And
For
tell
me,
us about your initial results with that, having launched to a community of ready to serve clients. How did that launch go? I know the
yeah,
physical book will be out at the
yeah,
recording of this when it goes live, but at this point the ebook is out. How is that ebook done?
yeah. So we sold about 500 copies of the ebook, which was so exciting. I mean,
That's
so cool to get it
awesome.
in the hands of the women and get good feedback. Like, I'll take any feedback, good or bad, but it was great to hear them say, "Oh, this is just what I needed," or "This was so helpful," or "I love your voice." Those were the things I was going for. So I was like, "Well, at least if they read that, then it'll go over well." So I'm thankful for that. I do believe that if I'm now pairing this book with a launch that's about the content and I'm doing live video sessions that go with the content and sell the book alongside it, that it really will just really thrive. So I'm really looking forward to trying that and seeing what God does with this community that is really ripe and ready for the content.
Mhm.
This time of year is also the perfect time to get it out. So his timing was always perfect. But I am excited about what he's going to do with it because I feel like if there's any insight he's given me, it's just that this is going to be something that's going to be really foundational to the next step.
I love that so much. In closing, do you have any words of wisdom, anything that you would share with somebody who's considering utilizing more of a community in their business?
Um, Yes, so much, so many copies. But the thing that I would say is that there is so much joy in connecting with people and hearing their stories, and then hearing that, to be honest, like I do thrive on being an Enneagram 2, and that like if they have a problem and I can help them solve it, that ability to help people, God has given me this gift to do some of that work, and it is so fulfilling to me. And so I feel like knowing that stepping out into community feels a little scary. It feels scary to be a front man for something, to feel like you're trying to attract people to you. But when you realize that you're not trying to do that, you're trying to connect people, and you just happen to be the glue that everyone is kind of connected to, that is when you really get to see the beauty of people's hearts coming together, and then you getting to be a part of watching it grow. Also, the other thing I would say that would be advice is like, just sit back and watch God work, because if he is telling you to do this,
Mm.
then he will grow this community for you. My community started with about 300 people. God gave me the plan of what I just described to you, like launch and release and welcome them into a paid community. And the community itself has grown to 12,000 people. It's going to be at 15 probably by the end of the year. It's growing exponentially. And then, my paid community is also thriving. So it's just this idea of like, just trust what God has said for you to do. I asked them to pay $25 a month to be a part of my community, and hoped that somebody would say yes.
Somebody would say yes.
And 4 years later, like 5 years on the full community, 4 years on the paid community, it has turned into something that is beyond my expectations of what it could ever be, like beyond my dreams. So it's amazing. And the impact that God can reveal through that work is now I'm impacting, and then they're going to their schools and they're impacting. You just see the dominoes that God has in mind that you just never knew. So trust the process for
Hey,
sure.
that's multiplication at its finest.
It is exactly,
Allison,
that's the word.
Allison, thank you so much for sharing your story. Thank you for sharing your heart. Thank you for sharing some of the practical and the unexpected with us. For everyone listening, please, please, please do check out the link in the comments. We are going to link the book and Allison's site there so you can go and learn more about what she does, her incredible community. And again, if you do any type of coaching, check her book out, because I'm telling you, it is not just for instructional teachers. So, Allison, thank you so much.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you.